Thanks for joining us in another edition of Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week, Mali's ousted leader Ibrahim Boubacar Keita flies to Dubai for treatment of a stroke. Then, will Russia ever own up to poisoning opposition leader Alexei Navalny? The government says it has nothing to do with him hanging on to his life in a hospital in Germany. Our special focus this week is on the tenure of the President of the UN General Assembly, Mr. Tijani Muhammad Bande, whose tenure is gradually coming to a close. And that's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. Let's begin with a quick check on other discussions in diplomatic circles. The Ghanaian President, Nana Akufo-Addo, has promised to do whatever is necessary to strengthen ties between Nigeria and his country. He revealed this in a statement in which he emphasized that progress of the region depends on mutual partnerships between the two, assuring that both will continue down that path. His statement comes as Nigeria's Speaker of the House of Representatives paid him a courtesy visit during the week on the invitation of his Ghanaian counterpart. President Nana Akufo-Addo admitted he was alarmed by Nigeria's warning the week before over the incessant harassment of Nigerians, as well as his sentiments and attitudes of the federal government of Nigeria. He said he had spoken to President Muhammadu Buhari and that he had taken an independent course of action in the matter by inviting Mr. Gbajabiamila to Ghana to meet with the Speaker of the Ghanaian Parliament. He also hinted at the establishment of a joint ministerial committee for ministers on both sides who would be responsible for shepherding Ghana-Nigeria issues anytime matters occur, assuring the Speaker that Nigerians are safe in Ghana. In other news, China and the World Health Organization have jointly launched an initiative to call for concerted efforts against global health threats. They made this known at the Beijing International Conference for Public Health Cooperation, a major event of the ongoing 2020 China International Fair for Trade in Services. Finally, rescue workers digging through rubble of a Beirut building for the third day say there is no longer hope of finding someone alive, more than a month since the massive port explosion that shattered the Lebanese capital. About 50 rescue workers and volunteers, including a specialist team from Chile, had worked for 3 days to locate anyone after sensors on Thursday were said to have detected signs of breathing and heat. Welcome back. It's still difficult to imagine what may have happened to ousted Malian leader Ibrahim Keita during the time he was held by soldiers who pulled him out of office about 3 weeks ago. It was only 2 weeks ago he announced his resignation via a broadcast from an unknown location, and even after he was released, said he didn't want to be reinstated as president, which is what the ECOWAS and other bodies in the international community were negotiating with the military. Now it appears his health is at stake. Having suffered a mini-stroke on Thursday, sources say he may be heading to the United Arab Emirates for further treatment. And we understand the UAE has agreed to send a medical plane to pick him up. 2 days before, he had been admitted to hospital after suffering what is called a transient ischemic attack, which occurs when blood supply to the brain is disrupted for a few minutes, causing stroke-like symptoms such as numbness on one side of the body, vision difficulties, or even confusion in understanding speech. While in hospital, a delegation from the ruling military, led by Colonel Assimi Goita, paid him a visit, which his family has confirmed. Interestingly, there is more going on in Mali as the military government has begun talks with opposition groups on its promised transition to civilian rule. Those talks held over the weekend in Bamako under the military government's chief, Assimi Goita, but he was not present. Saturday's meeting was originally planned for last weekend, but was called off at the last minute after a quarrel between the military and the June 5 movement, which spearheaded the protests that led to the toppling of Keita. Shortly after the opening ceremony, supporters of the M5 RFP coalition began to protest, accusing the military government of excluding them from most working groups. The moderator later announced that the M5 RFP would be able to participate in all the working groups, which calmed the coalition's supporters and allowed the event to resume. And the talks are scheduled to continue in the coming weekend. So another issue of diplomatic importance now, European leaders and NATO are trying to get Russia to admit it was behind the poisoning of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The Russian government denies the allegations, instead asking Germany, where Navalny is being treated, to furnish it more details on Navalny's condition.
Ever since word got out that the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny was poisoned with the Novichok nerve agent, once associated with the Soviet Union, fingers have been pointed to Russian President Vladimir Putin for answers. Head of Anti-Corruption Foundation and close ally of Russian opposition politician Navalny, Ivan Znanov, says the use of a nerve agent from the Novichok family in Navalny's poisoning indicates government involvement. Germany, where Navalny is being treated, made the announcement of the use of the agent on Wednesday. Novichok is the same nerve agent Britain says Russia used to poison former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia in the British city of Salisbury 2 years ago. Russia has repeatedly denied any involvement in the attack, which the Skripal survived. One member of the public, Dawn Sturgis, was killed. The contamination and recovery measures in the city cost millions of pounds. Novichok is a deadly group of nerve agents developed by the Soviet military in the 1970s and 1980s. Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas has urged Russia to investigate Navalny's poisoning now that clinical tests showed that he had been attacked with a chemical nerve agent. Countries have been picking their words on response to Russia's possible involvement. Even the German Chancellor Angela Merkel said on Thursday that any German or European response depends on whether Russia helps clear up the case. Russia has said the West should not rush to judge it over Navalny's poisoning and that there were no grounds to accusing it of the crime. The European Union says the bloc could slap new sanctions after a probe reveals who was responsible for the deliberate poisoning. They have not minced words in expressing condemnation of Navalny's poisoning, with calls growing to punish Russia for the use of Novichok.
And it's also in the interest of Russia to provide answers to the questions, because this type of chemical agent is not freely available. It was used on Russian territory against a Russian citizen. So it's very important that it's thoroughly investigated and that the answers are provided both to the Russian public and to the international public.
Meanwhile, some politicians are calling for a European response that involves the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline is needed against Russia. CSU leader and Bavarian state premier Markus Söder says Europe needs to come up with an intelligent, long-term and unified response. The 1,230-kilometer-long pipeline from Russia to Germany, designed by Gazprom, was according to its initial schedule due to have been operational in the first half of this year. Even NATO allies agree Russia must cooperate fully with an impartial investigation to be led by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons into the poisoning of Navalny. US President Donald Trump took a different path when he said United States must look seriously into Navalny's poisoning, but that his administration had not yet seen any proof.
I hear Germany has made was it definitive or almost definitive? But we have not seen it ourselves, no. But we have not seen it ourselves. But I would certainly be okay with that. They want to do something. They want to take action.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reiterated the government's response on Friday when he said Russia had not received any data from Germany regarding the condition of Alexei Navalny. He also said Western countries are accusing Russia of poisoning Navalny without presenting any data. For now, Navalny remains in hospital, and Russia has not opened a criminal case for now, as it says there is no solid evidence yet of a crime.
And now to our special focus this week. Mr. Tijani Muhammad Bande has been president of the UN General Assembly for almost a year now. The Nigerian diplomat and academic political scientist has been in office since September 17, 2019, after previously serving as vice president from September 2016. He was also Nigeria's ambassador to the United Nations from 2010 to 2016. Now, a lot has happened under his watch as president of the UNGA, and perhaps the most challenging of all has been the coronavirus pandemic, which has prevented physical meetings at UN headquarters, raised tensions between countries, and even this year's UNGA will be held virtually because of the pandemic. There's also been the huge explosion in Lebanon, the trade war that continues between China and the United States. Under his tenure, the UN has drawn much attention to SDGs, to poverty eradication, the frailty of world health systems. He joins us now to reflect on his 1 year as president of the UNGA and, of course, the happenings in the world of diplomacy during his time in office. President of the UNGA, Mr. Tijani Mohammed Bande, thank you for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now, this will be my last interview with you in this position. How do you feel 1 year since you assumed this role?
Well, thank you very much indeed. I think one feels relieved that one has been able within the year to, despite all the challenges that we have all faced and still continue to face, we have been able to steer the affairs of the Assembly pretty well. I feel delighted that not just personally, but that Nigeria has been able to deliver on its promise to give leadership that is needed for the Assembly during the year, on behalf of the continent as well.
Do you have any idea who succeeds you at this point? Is that still under wraps for now until the UNGA, which is in a couple of weeks?
No, I think there's nothing hidden. The next president of the General Assembly at the 75th session will be Ambassador Boskin of Turkey. He's already in town, and we have been transitioning for the last 3 weeks. So he'll take over on the 15th of this month, in the next 9-10 days.
So first of all, you are a Nigerian who's occupying this position of UNGA president. What has that been like for you, having to oversee so many countries and so many issues, and to participate in much of these global discussions in the UN?
Well, it is a privilege to not only be an ambassador of Nigeria to the United Nations, but also in particular to have the privilege of additionally being the president of the General Assembly at the 74th session. The issues under discussion in the Assembly are always critical issues affecting nations. And obviously, it takes a lot of hard work to listen and to work with 193 countries to get to agreement on many issues, many of which are seen differently by different nations or regions. So it's certainly, as a Nigerian, I certainly feel privileged that we are able to work with other countries to push the global agenda on matters to do with health, education, inclusion, poverty eradication, and a whole lot of issues that have traditionally been on the table of the United Nations as the preeminent multilateral institution in the world.
Now, interestingly, the coronavirus pandemic took a large chunk, of your tenure, and the UN trying to be at the forefront of this pandemic, trying to gather nations and rallying support between countries as the fight against this pandemic continues. How has that affected the priority of areas of your presidency?
I think what the pandemic has done was to bring very, very clear, focused attention to the idea that solidarity and partnerships are key to the United Nations. Obviously, in relation to poverty eradication, which is a very important subject for Nigeria and for the world, it's clear that dealing with poverty has become a clear objective that should continue to be focused on. It's very evident that the pandemic affected everyone, but its fallouts have been felt and have been felt more by poorer countries. But not only poorer countries, in all parts of the world, the poorer segment have been the most hit in terms of ability to social distance, in terms of ability to provide for families. And so what is different is that more advanced countries have a bit more resources to give palliatives to their citizens than countries that are not so privileged.
We'll take a short break. Diplomatic Channel, we'll be right back. With this coronavirus, we've seen, well, there's been a lot of international interaction still, a lot of reaching out. The world has become a global village, all thanks to this pandemic. Countries are helping each other out as regards COVID-19 relief and so on. But we've also seen the selfishness of some nations, for example, with the vaccine race. Now, some countries have developed vaccines up until the point where they can say they have they're really close to being able to use this vaccine on the population. But, you know, other countries have come in, such as the US, the UK, have bought millions of doses, just waiting until, you know, these vaccines are fully ready, have been vetted by the WHO, and they can use this, you know, for their own people. How is the UN helping to provide a balance so that even poorer nations still have access to these vaccines, even though these big nations seem to be, you know, hoarding it all up?
Well, I think two things. One is that for the United Nations, the position has been clear. There is nothing to be gained by talking of vaccines in relation to nations. And from the very beginning, all the resolutions we have had in the General Assembly, and we are, not only did we have two, but we are negotiating an omnibus resolution again to strengthen our commitment to guaranteeing that once available, vaccines would be accessible to all who need it. And the commitment again is for the United Nations, those who are most in need first. Now, there have been calls that have been virtually heeded to in having pooled resources to assist countries during the pandemic. And by and large, this commitment is still there. As we speak, there are talks of vaccines that have gone to particular levels of development. And obviously, there are efforts led by the United Nations and also by other organizations that of a multilateral nature to try to guarantee that vaccines, when available, are available to all.
So I want to talk about some of the other issues that have sprung up, you know, even under your presidency. The explosions that happened in Lebanon, and, you know, all of the relief efforts going on there. We've seen France, especially at the forefront of helping to rebuild Beirut. The French President Emmanuel Macron has been there twice already, trying to hold leaders accountable. And then there's also been, you know, the coup in Mali, where the military is still in power and still negotiating with the opposition right now to secure a transition government, which they say could happen in about 2 years or so, even though, you know, the regional power ECOWAS wants it to happen within a year. Where is the UN in the Lebanon crisis and in what's going on in Mali?
Well, the UN has been in each of the places you have mentioned. President Macron took leadership, but leadership also with other organizations, the UN in particular. And France has had a very strong relationship with Lebanon historically. And Macron has shown leadership that the UN has been also a partner to. And when you listen to the efforts of the calls for support to Lebanon, it is really the UN that is really at the center of this. And the UN has had a very strong presence for peacekeeping efforts in Lebanon. Indeed, the very last effort of the UN before the explosion was really around continued support to peacekeeping efforts in Lebanon. So UN has been accompanying Lebanon on issues to do with its peace and stability. In relation to the current issue of coup, there has been complete collaboration in terms of how to approach the issue. Both ECOWAS, which has taken leadership because of the principle of subsidiarity, and the AU have worked also with the UN to put the idea that unconstitutional changes of government must be discouraged. It is the same language, the same discussion that is going on. And it is in order that ECOWAS is taking lead. And even today, I'm sure this is one of the issues to be discussed, but there has been very fine, very strong collaboration among ECOWAS, obviously AU, and the UN on Mali and relations and matters relating to changes of government outside constitutional means.
The Boko Haram crisis continues in northeastern Nigeria. West African nations are still struggling, with this insurgency. What else has the UN done to help these countries to cope with this looming crisis that has continued for more than 10 years now?
But Boko Haram, from early on, was a problem affecting the region. And the efforts have been very strong. The UN Security Council has been very active in this matter. And 3 years ago, the Council visited the area to give support. Beyond the Council, the EU has given support. Individual countries also within the EU have given support. I have gone to Maiduguri on occasion in relation to this as Nigeria's UN ambassador, and discussions even to have local authorities in the neighboring countries to also work together to have a common approach, I think are also relatively successful. Plus, of course, the Lake Chad Basin Commission has also done its bit. So there is a lot going on relating to this matter.
What's next for you after presidency of the UNGA? Perhaps politics back home?
I'm not a politician. I think you know that, my sister. I think I'm a public servant, and my real interest is really wherever located to do the best for myself and for Nigeria and for the continent. And the presidency of the Assembly was given to me because the president of Nigeria, His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, decided that he had confidence in me to do the job for the entire world. And I have never forgotten, it's a great privilege that President Buhari chose me to lead the UN and got the Minister of Foreign Affairs to use all the resources available to campaign that I hold it. And I've always, every day, taken this very, very seriously, that I will not fail Nigeria or Africa or the world or myself. And I am very grateful indeed that we have done far more than anybody had imagined, pandemic or no pandemic, because we ensured the assembly continued, because the people's work should continue under all circumstances. I continue to be a public servant and will do work for the people wherever located. So, of course, I am a permanent student also. I always learn, and I continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Bande. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you and going with you on this journey through your presidency at the UN General Assembly. We wish you all the best and success in your future endeavor.
Thank you very much for the work you do for us. Thank you very much indeed.
And this is where we end the program this week. Tell us what you think. The addresses are at the bottom of your screen. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.